Welcome to the Technical Writing Success Podcast from Curt Robbins, where we help you get smarter than your competition. Hire Curt to coach you or your employees in AI to avoid a pink slip or having your competition eat your lunch. This is episode 192, and I am Fred Jones.
And I'm Daphne Blake.
Imagine stepping into a new role, and you're just handed this massive, highly technical software manual.
Oh, yeah, the dreaded giant binder.
Right. You're trying to figure out a critical system integration that your entire project depends on. You're reading the steps, following the logic, and slowly this creeping realization washes over you.
That the person who wrote the manual has clearly never actually used the software.
Exactly. I mean, they're using the right nouns and verbs, but the sequence is just totally divorced from the reality of the interface.
It reads like a translation of a translation. You can almost feel the writer guessing at how the system behaves under load, just hoping the engineering specs they copied actually map onto the real world.
It's the worst. So this episode reviews a March 16th interview with senior technical writer Robert Delwood by show producer Curt Robbins. We are exploring exactly why that happens and how the tech industry is trying to fix it.
Right, because Delwood represents a highly specialized and honestly somewhat rare solution to this problem of disconnected documentation. He operates under a title that wasn't designed in a boardroom, but evolved out of pure necessity.
The programmer writer.
The programmer writer, yeah. Our goal today is to really unpack this hybrid role for you listening. We'll look at how it functions day to day, synthesize Delwood's 5 rules for bulletproof documentation, and look at how AI is actually being used in the trenches right now.
Yeah, cutting through a lot of the executive hype. And to understand the programmer writer, we really have to start with Delwood's origin story, because it perfectly shows why this dual skill set is so vital.
He brings this fascinating collision of backgrounds. He's been a hobbyist programmer since the 7th grade.
Wow, 7th grade.
Yeah, someone who fundamentally enjoys the logic of coding. But his formal academic education is actually in journalism. He was trained to investigate and report.
Which is such a rare combo. Usually the industry just completely silos those two mindsets.
Oh, entirely. You either have the hardcore developer who resents translating their elegant code into plain English, or you have the eloquent writer who, breaks out in a cold sweat the moment a command line interface throws an error.
Right. But right out of school, Delwood lands a job as a technical writer at NASA down in Houston. But the environment was apparently just total chaos.
Yeah, the building he was assigned to wasn't even finished yet. They lacked basic equipment, administrative tools, just any sort of established workflow.
So faced with that gridlock, he essentially hacks his own environment. He sits down at his MS-DOS PC, fires up BASIC, and codes a custom scheduling tool just to manage his own workflow.
Right. He literally built the infrastructure he needed to survive the job. And his manager notices this proactive approach. Within 6 months, he's promoted from technical writer to developer.
But he never abandons his journalism instinct. Even as a developer, he relentlessly writes the documentation for his own apps.
And that combination caught the attention of the broader industry. A friend at Microsoft eventually recruited him for a brand new, rare position they desperately needed to fill a writer who could read and write code.
The programmer writer. Which he says is still his favorite title because there's zero ambiguity. To make this tangible for you listening, think of a purely non-technical writer documenting code as, like, a restaurant critic who has never cooked a meal.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. They can tell you the sauce broke, but they have no idea why the sauce broke in the kitchen. Delwood is the chef who stepped off the line to write the review. He knows the underlying mechanics.
And the tech industry pays a premium for that chef's perspective because it solves a massive logistical bottleneck, which is the empathy gap between writers and engineers.
They speak the jargon.
Exactly. When Delwood works in an office, he intentionally requests a desk seated right with the developers to dissolve any separation. Because he reads source code directly, he doesn't have to constantly interrupt a developer's flow state to ask questions.
He just opens the repository and finds the answers himself. But wait, I have a pushback here.
Okay, shoot.
If he's hired to write, isn't spending time coding custom tools just, doubling his workload and wasting time?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know. But writing those tools is the ultimate efficiency hack. Think about the alternative. If writers need a custom script to automate formatting, they have to submit a ticket to engineering.
Oh, right, the endless Jira backlog.
Exactly. It gets prioritized behind critical bugs. They might wait 6 weeks for a simple tool. By coding it himself in an afternoon, Delwood completely unblocks his team. That's why he insists all tech writers today should learn some programming, even just Python or JavaScript.
Let's take a brief break for a special message from our producer, Curt Robbins.
Hi, this is Curt Robbins. First, thanks for listening. I truly appreciate your support. I want to let you know that I'm currently accepting new clients. My rates are affordable, and I have more than 25 years of experience working for enterprise companies like Microsoft, Northrop Grumman, Oracle, PNC Bank, FedEx, USAA, and Wells Fargo, among many others. If you want to improve your IT documentation and communications, hire me. I deliver fast, know how to use AI to improve efficiency and accuracy, and love going the extra mile to satisfy my clients. Thank you for subscribing and listening. Back to you, Daphne and Fred.
Welcome back to the Technical Writing Success Podcast, where we help you get smarter than your competition by coaching you in AI.
So on the flip side of that, if it's so helpful to know how to code, why doesn't the industry just have the developers write the manuals? They wrote the code, right?
Well, Delwood is adamant that relying on developers for docs is a total recipe for disaster.
Why is that?
The biggest issue is the curse of knowledge. Developers have such an intricate mental model of the system that they are often fundamentally incapable of explaining it to a novice. They skip steps because those steps are invisible to them.
Like trying to explain to a relative how to change a Wi-Fi password over the phone. You say, type the IP address, forgetting they don't even know what an IP address is.
Right. Now multiply that blind spot by 10,000 lines of enterprise code. Plus, there's a brutal economic reality. Developers are expensive. Making a senior engineer wrestle with a user manual is just a profound misallocation of resources.
It distracts them from their primary mandate, which is writing and optimizing code. Delwood even references this classic Three Stooges routine, where Moe hands Curly a hammer and says, "When I nod my head, you hit it."
And Curly hits Moe's head.
Exactly. Comic mayhem ensues. But in API documentation, that kind of ambiguity crashes client servers.
Which brings us to his operational philosophy. Since he started specializing in API docs in 2003, he's formulated 5 rules for bulletproof documentation. First, learn a language. Broaden how you learn videos, trial and error to understand how developers consume info.
And rule 2 is make each call. You have to personally test the documentation. He actually shared this brilliant anecdote where he found a process ID value was missing from an API's return call.
And QA had totally missed it.
Yes. The in-house devs just knew it was supposed to be there, so they hallucinated the correct output. Delwood only caught it because he actually executed the call himself as an outsider.
Which leads to rule 3. Document it for yourself. If he doesn't understand it, he stops and figures it out. He acts as an experienced developer who just happens to be ignorant of this specific product.
It's a defensive mechanism, really. You document the pain points, so you don't have to figure them out again in 6 months. And that transitions right into rule 4, which is dog fooding, using your own documentation constantly.
Right. Persistent editing is a virtue for writers, not a weakness.
It's like an architect being forced to live in the house they just designed for a month. It's the only way you'll notice where the drafts are, or if a door opens the wrong way.
Exactly. And his final rule, rule 5, don't focus on tools, focus on content. Don't waste time arguing about Windows versus Mac or Markdown editors. Write apps, make calls in Postman obsessively, and extract maximum detail.
That deep extraction of truth is the perfect lens for our final topic, because we're in 2026, and we have to talk about artificial intelligence. If you read the executive summaries, you'd think AI has completely automated the programmer-writer role. But Delwood provides a massive reality check here.
He really does. He actively uses AI for generating complex algorithms, grammar checking, mapping out workflows. He said AI was nearly spot on for a recent workflow.
But there is a massive line he will not cross. He never uses AI to write the actual content of the documentation.
Never. Because the reality of AI coding is that it rarely compiles on the first try. It uses the wrong libraries, it misses values, it saves typing, but it absolutely requires a human touch to actually get it working.
Right. If an AI is generating a routine but getting the libraries wrong, aren't we just shifting the technical writer's job, like from being a creator to being a glorified AI babysitter and debugger?
That tension is a huge issue in the industry right now. We're seeing CEOs laying off thousands of team members to save money, explicitly citing AI as the reason.
And in partially reporting Delwood's perspective here, he believes the real threat to documentation quality isn't the AI tech itself, it's those executive cost-cutting decisions.
Yeah, he had a funny quip about that. He said, true equality will be reached when CEOs are laid off because of AI, noting he's seen instances where a magic 8 ball could basically do a CEO's job.
That's hilarious, but it highlights a structural reality. AI only knows what has already happened, but technical writers operate at the bleeding edge. They're documenting quirks that were invented hours ago. The AI literally doesn't have the context yet.
Only a human with empathy and a testing environment can translate that behavior.
Which brings us full circle. We went from a makeshift DOS tool at NASA to the empathy of the programmer writer, through the 5 pillars of API docs, and finally to a grounded view of AI.
The big takeaway for you listening, whether you're learning Python or managing a team, is the principle of dogfooding. Testing your own explanations is universally applicable. Empathy requires friction.
Exactly. And here's a final thought to mull over. As tools get better at generating massive amounts of information, maybe the most valuable human skill of the future won't be creating content. It might be the ability to deeply understand a complex system and explain it simply to another human being.
Acting as that ultimate empathetic barrier between human intent and machine execution.
Thank you for listening to the Technical Writing Success Podcast from Curt Robbins, where we help you get smarter than your competition. Hire us to coach you and your employees in AI to future-proof your career or company. Subscribe now to never miss a career-saving episode.